This is Module 7, DHCP version 4. In this module, we'll look into the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. We explain how DHCP v4 operates in a small to medium-sized business network. We'll configure a router as a DHCP v4 server and configure a router as a DHCP version 4 client. DHCP version 4 concepts. This protocol, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, is the protocol a router or a server may have, and its use is to assign IPv4 addresses automatically or dynamically. And because desktop clients typically make up the bulk of network nodes, the DHCP-v4 is an extremely useful and time-saving tool for network administrator. A dedicated DHCP version 4 server is scalable and relatively easy to manage. However, in a small branch or SOHO location, a Cisco router can be configured to provide DHCP version 4 services without the need for a dedicated server. Cisco iOS software supports an optional, full-featured DHCP version 4 server. The DHCP version 4 server dynamically assigns or leases an IP version 4 address from a pool of addresses for a limited period of time chosen by the server or until the client no longer needs the address. Clients lease the information from the server for an administratively defined period, and administrators configure the DHCP version 4 servers to set the leases to timeout at different intervals. The lease is typically anywhere from 24 hours to a week or more, and when the lease expires, the client must ask for another address, although the client is typically reassigned the same address. Steps to obtain a lease. First is you have so usually in Windows, it's by default is the IP address to assign automatically is enabled. So what will happen? It will send a discover. So in the discover, it's like this client, this end device is looking for a DHCP server. And what the server will do is to send a reply, to send an offer. It will offer an IP address. And what the client will do is to request for that IP. It will say, okay, I'm fine with the IP ad you gave me, say 192.168.10.1. And what the DHCP server will say to the client is that, okay, I will allot you that IP ad. It's yours. So it will send an acknowledgement. So again, it's discover, offer, request, acknowledgement. The mnemonic is DORA. Okay, so again, the one that I explained a while ago. Okay, about request and then also this one is for the renewal. Okay, so you have DHCP request and then acknowledgement. To configure the DHCP version 4 server. So since now we have this basic understanding of DHCP version 4, we'll set up the DHCP version 4. First thing to do is to exclude IP addresses. So in setting up or assigning IP ad, it's recommended that there are still parts in the network where it should be manually assigned, where especially for those devices you want to secure, manually assigned IP is much secured. So you want to exclude that. Say, for example, you want to exclude the first 10 IP addresses, so meaning, let's say you exclude 192.168.10.1 up to 10.10. So when the DHCP server will assign an IP ad, it starts with 11. So to exclude range of IP, we type this command, IP DHCP excluded dash address, the first IP and then the last IP. That's how you do it. And the next thing to do is to set a name, IP DHCP pool, and then set a pool name. And then after that, you set network, then the network address you are to assign, and then the subnet mask. And then to also, for the DHCP server to assign a default gateway, we type default dash router and then the IP address of the default gateway. For the DHCP server to assign DNS server, we type DNS-server and then the IP address of the DNS server. For the domain name, domain-name, and then the domain. And then you may also have the command for the lease and also for setting up the IP address for the NetBIOS name server. Here's an example. So again, IP DHCP excluded address and then the range of those IPs you want to exclude. For example, there's another one that you want to exclude that's not in the range. You may have a separate IP DHCP excluded address for that. And then you set the pool name and then the network address and subnet mask. This is for the default gateway. This is for the DNS server and then the domain name. Then to verify, show run. If you want to check if like a MAC is binding to the IP assigned by the DHCP server, we type show IP DHCP binding. If you want to display count information regarding the number of DHCP messages, we type show IP DHCP server statistics. Here's an example of the show running config, uh, and then with the section DHCP. If you want to only display that part of the DHCP configuration. This is the example for the show IP DHCP binding. And then the relay, we set up the relay um, if a DHCP server will assign an IP ad to a network which is not directly connected to the DHCP server. I will have a demonstration, a separate video demonstration where I'll demonstrate how this DHCP version 4 relay works. It's much better to really work on the video demonstration for you to really see how the DHCP version 4 relay works. Okay, so usually this is the command. You do this command IP helper dash address and then the IP ad of the DHCP server to the router where the end devices are connected, the one that will be assigned by the the one that will be given an IP address assignment by the DHCP server. Okay, so there. To verify the helper address, if it's really configured, we type show IP interface and then the interface. To set up to enable like DHCP in a given port of a Soho router, we type IP address DHCP and then we activate it by typing no shutdown. There's also a DHCP actually even for Linksys, those that are GUI based. Okay, uh, like I have a screenshot here. Usually see this for DSL, for cable routers, for fiber Soho router. Soho means um, small office home office network. And to summarize, again, DHCP version 4 server dynamically assigns or leases an IP version 4 to a client from a pool of addresses for a limited period of time chosen by the server or until the client no longer needs the address. The DHCP version 4 lease process begins with the client sending message requesting the services of a DHCP server, and the client must contact the DHCP server periodically to extend the lease. When the client boosts, it begins with a four-step process to obtain a lease: the discover, the offer, request, and then the acknowledgement. And prior to lease expiration, the client begins a two-step process to renew the lease with the DHCP version 4 server, then DHCP request, then DHCP acknowledge. A Cisco router running Cisco iOS software can be configured to act as a DHCP server and use the following steps to configure a Cisco iOS DHCP version 4 server. Exclude IP version 4 address, define a pool name, and configure the DHCP version pool. Verify your configuration using the show running config section DHCP, also show IP DHCP binding, and show IP DHCP server statistics. The DHCP version 4 service is enabled by default, and if you want to disable it, you type no service DHCP. And this ends this module, module 7 of DHCP. I'd like to thank you for listening. Keep safe. Together we learn as one.